we certainly believe in the airline industry or our aircraft industry over the next, you name it, 100 years, and we love the. It's a big business. This company is a vital part of it. It's going to be a vital part of it 50 years from now, and we love participating in it.
So that was Warren Buffett on Countdown to the Closing Bell just a few hours ago with Liz Clayman, the billionaire investor reaching a deal to acquire aerospace supplier Precision Castparts, more than $37 billion. Joining us now is the tech consultant, Katie Linendoll, former New York Times digital chief, Martin Niesenholtz. Great to see you both. So Buffett comes in and buys a company worth $37 billion. No wonder our markets closed up, but showing optimism. What is your take on aerospace as he sees it?
Well, this is absolutely a big deal and big enough for a cool $37 billion, as you noted. And what I thought was interesting is, I had to actually call my friends over in aerospace and get really the 360 on what Precision Castparts actually is. And it was interesting to find out that, yes, this is in the aerospace world. This is a company that makes a lot of components like jet engines. And it's putting a huge stamp and a huge spotlight on for him making that investment in this industry.
Because to your point, there's Richard Branson, there's Elon Musk. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who want to go north.
I think he's buying it at a low. I mean, the stock has been under pressure because some piece of it is in the energy business. And so it's a little bit depressed, and I think this is a perfect Warren Buffett play.
Well, I was just going to say, you obviously know Warren Buffett's, just that focus on value. He said, I haven't really changed the way that I invest in decades, and, it's basically just looking for undiscovered value. Speaking of which, Google completely reorganizing itself and now is going to be called Alphabet, with Google, as we understand it, just the internet business. This reorg seems like it's about focus, but Martin, you said something interesting as well about what's going on in Europe.
Well, it's a totally weird idea, but I mean, there's been a lot of pressure in Europe for Google to separate its search engine from the rest of the business because it's a monopoly, in essence, in their view. And so I thought this might be a way to set up a new structure that gets them out of the old Microsoft dilemma that, defocused Microsoft so much.
And just to remind people, in the year 2000, the EU went so hard against Microsoft and at the very least it proved to be a huge distraction for Microsoft, basically calling it a monopoly. And Microsoft never really bounced back. I mean, I'm assuming there were other issues, but it never bounced back.
Well, it defocused them.
As far as how you see Google and, hey, we still want to do self-driving cars and all these passion projects that we know are important to our employees, but maybe we separate them. Is that how you see it?
I think Google X Labs is probably one of the coolest sectors of it. I mean, elevators to space, self-driving cars. It is going to be really interesting, to your point, how we see this reorg shake out.
Okay, so we'll see what happens with there. It's talking about Tesla. Well, we heard Elon Musk's name come up where I brought it up with aerospace. But it seems as if the car company is just a cash burner. People love the car, though. Have you driven one, Martin?
I have not driven one. And I can't honestly say that I've driven one, no.
But as far as the name and people loving Elon Musk, all the engineers will work for him almost for free because they believe in his vision. But, I mean, the Tesla is losing more than $4,000 on every car sold. That's not a sustainable business model, no matter how much you love the founder.
Look, you could be very, very cynical and say that Tesla is basically a creation of the regulatory regime. In other words, people get huge benefit based on their state and federal subsidies, and they get to sell credits to the car companies that don't have the energy credits that they need. So I don't want to be a cynic, but there's been a lot written about that.
Katie,
I also think it's pretty amazing when we do the math here. They're losing $4,000 per vehicle when it's a $70,000 car. It's pretty amazing. But also, I think it's very interesting that he has now come out and made promises that in the first quarter of 2016, he's stating that he is going to make profit with new car models. I think that's a lot to put into that statement, but also, too, knowing now the new energy business that he's hoping to go into, there's $1 million question is how he's going to make money out of that at the very moment right now.
Make money out of that, and it seems as if he has not been able so far this year to deliver the number of cars that he even said he would deliver. So even just not even including other new up-and-coming models, just the model that exists. All right, we are going to continue the conversation. We'll be back in a little bit. Verizon is shifting away from subsidizing smartphones, cutting its 2-year plans. We are back with Katie Linendoll, Martin Niesenholtz. So welcome back. What does this mean for Apple? What does this mean for Samsung? Because people really time their smartphone purchases. Hey, when I'm due for an upgrade in 6 months, I just have to hang on with my old bad phone till it gets subsidized.
Well, I just went through this, okay, and I saw that a senior executive at Verizon claimed that you didn't need to do math anymore. It was the most.
Wait,
oh my God!
What is that?
You need an Excel spreadsheet.
You need an Excel spreadsheet, exactly, to get this right. Anyway, through all of these machinations, somehow it came out even. In other words, if I had leased the phone or I had bought the phone, they basically made it come out even. But I have no idea how they got there. None. I mean, it's like passing a PhD exam.
Okay, all right. Well, that's not exactly. It doesn't really speak that well of Verizon's customer service. AT&T is the same, so I'm not going to throw Verizon under the bus. Katie, what do you think?
I think we've all been there with that frustration. And I think now, though, this is marking a key time in the wireless industry as a whole. Contracts and subsidizing phones is becoming so passé. So I have to hand it to T-Mobile. I think they've really been great in this space of kind of shaking things up. It only takes one to shake it up, and we're starting to see that. And we're starting to see consumer frustration winning over at the end of the day, which is great.
All right, speaking of consumer frustration, there was one activist who just took a picture of the toy aisle at Target and said girls' toys should not be separated necessarily from boys' toys, and they should not be labeled girls in pink and boys in blue. Martin, you have 2 daughters.
I do.
We're coming to you first on this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the specific case was this boys' building set versus this girls' building set, and that did strike me as being wrong. I mean, girls should.
A building set is a building set.
And a building set, yeah. I mean, girls should not think that they have some kind of an inferior building set to the boys' building set. I don't think that works. At least not as the father of 2 girls.
But it's weird as the way that kids see it, because maybe a girl thinks, great, I get a building set and it's pastels and I like that better than blue anyway.
I think now, too, I think this speaks to a much bigger issue. I think you have to be very careful. We're in a very politically correct time. And you look at somebody like Target, where at the end of the day, they want the sales. They're going to do what is neutral. They're playing it smart. They're playing it safe. Right. And it's really hard to take a side because both sides are coming out so strong and with adamant points of view.
And there are some just general neutral all around. I mean, I played with Legos all growing up. I think almost every kid that I knew did, whether it was boy or girl, it's just Lego.
Yeah, but do you get to a point where there's no difference between the boys' and the girls' clothes? I mean, could you get to that point with your point? I think you could. I think there are people who would argue that there shouldn't be the 2 distinctions.
Yeah, that's going to be harder to pull off. We're going to bring you back to Fashion Week, Martin. In the meantime, thank you for the conversation, Katie Linendoll and Martin Niesenholtz.